Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, January 8th regular Committee of the Whole meeting. All members are present with the exception of Councilor Franco, who has a work commitment this evening. Calendar and communications. Councilor Baumgartner.
Good evening. This past week I attended the town hall meeting hosted by our House side of the legislative delegation. Representative Dela Cruz and Representative Conley held their town hall meeting where they went over their legislative agenda and asked the public for their input on how they should represent us up in Hartford, and had the opportunity to ask them a question about coastal resiliency and how it's important to Groton. As you know, in the coming years we'll be facing graver and graver threats from the impending rising sea levels that will be hitting our shores, and obviously with more and more natural disasters at the likes of Hurricane Maria, it's important Groton remains prepared for a catastrophic disaster. We've been very lucky, obviously, since Hurricane Sandy. This past week, earlier this week, we saw quite a bit of a downpour, and it can show even if it's a little more than a lot of rain, but nonetheless, even a little bit of rain can cause quite a bit of damage. So obviously, it's important to work with our legislative delegation in the state on these issues, and as well as our federal partners. But it was a great conversation, and looking forward to having them, I think, in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. Councilor Park.
Okay, I attended the Groton Farm project presentation that was held in New London at RD 86, and that was a nice presentation. Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Also received correspondence regarding appointments that will be discussed later on. Another one regarding the staff is looking into other issues, and the RTM invitation to have a joint meeting with the town council. And the other thing, the other information I have is Mrs. Harris from St. John's Church has invited all the town councilors to their Dr. Martin Luther King event on January 21st at 11 a.m. This is also open to the public. They put on a very nice presentation, and they would love the public to come as well as the town council.
All right. I attended the City of Groton Economic Commission back in November. I forgot to mention it. Other than that, I've received a few communications, including one from Carl Perizzotti about the budget process and the upcoming goals and all that. So.
Thank you. Councilor Ober.
Busy week in real estate. I did attend the town hall meeting with Chris and Joe. It was excellent. It was a lot of information that was shared. And last night we had a meeting of the beautification committee, which went very well, and we have new members. And we're now working on a couple solid projects with the assistance of our town manager. So we're moving forward. And we'll be having another meeting in 2 weeks. And it's on the calendar, and we'd love to have more members. We're just a group of volunteers, and so we'd like to have more volunteers, especially if there's somebody out there that really understands flowers.
I attended the Groton Family Farm meeting last night, which Juliet mentioned, Councilor. And last Saturday, I attended a Council of Connecticut Council of Municipalities seminar on municipal budgets and getting ready for our upcoming long session in the next couple of months.
Great. Councilor Schmidt.
Oh, I also attended the Family Farm meeting last night in New London.
I have no report.
Thank you.
When I did get I'm sorry, I got a message about a problem on Judson Street, and Manager Burt took care of that.
Very good. I attended the meeting that Dr. Burrows hosted last night regarding plans for the family farm. And I have a communication from Chairperson Watson from the Board of Education, and she wanted to extend an invitation to the council to have a joint meeting to start off their budget process. And it would be held on, I'm just checking the date here, it'll be on Monday, February 4th. Is there any objection to scheduling a special town council meeting to meet with the Board of Ed to do preliminary budget discussions? No objection. So, Mr. Burt, can you ask Ms. Hilton to do a special meeting for us? Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Burt, do you have any communications?
No, because I've got my notes. I went to many, many meetings, though.
Many, many meetings. All right. We're on to item 4, approval of minutes. Councilor Baumgartner, the minutes begin on page 2, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the Committee of the Whole minutes of December 18th, 2018. So moved.
Moved by Baumgartner and seconded by Zatari. Excuse me, I have a cough drop in my mouth. I apologize. Is there anything in the minutes that you wanted to address? Needs addressing? Seeing none. All those in favor of acceptance of the minutes of December 18th, 2018, Committee of the Whole, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved unanimously. We are on to new business, and we're going to slightly adjust the order of business. Councilor Parker, if we could do item 5D first, because I believe we have a gentleman here from Groton Long Point that's with us this evening, correct? So that will be on item 5D 2019 for replacement of Groton Long Point Bridge over Palmer Cove update, and this is on page 25 in your packet.
Do you want me to just read the recommended action?
Sure, thank you.
This is a discussion item. The Committee of the Whole will need to come to a consensus on how they would like to
Do you
proceed.
have an extra for the minutes? Thank you.
So I so move.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's no action, so thank you for introducing the item. Mr. Schneider, would you introduce the gentleman that you have with us this evening, please?
Right. Excuse me. To my left is Jim Platosh. He's with AECom, which is our bridge consultant, and the person handing out the paperwork is your town engineer, Greg Hanover. Just real briefly, is the department tonight, staff would like to review with the town council the study that was completed for the replacement of the bridge, which is the Groton Long Point Road over Palmer's Cove. This is inspected biannually by the state, and the state has inspected this bridge and is rated in poor condition and need of repair. This 50-foot bridge was constructed in 1935 and is the only vehicle access to Mumford Cove and Groton Long Point. In 2010 and 11, the department was provided funding to prepare alternatives for the rehabilitation or replacement of the structure. Stakeholder meetings were held in August of 2012 and February 2011 to engage the public, the political subdivisions, emergency services, utilities, and the regulatory agencies. Alternatives were prepared and evaluated for costs, constructability, permitting, economic long-term impacts to sea level changes, not only for the bridge but for the causeway that's on the Groton Long Point side. The final report to the town council was back in 2013, and at that time the town council did select an alternative, and we moved and we had our consultant refine that alternative, and that was in September 2015. From 2015 until now, the funding or the process was put into the capital improvement program to bond this project, and it never really came to the top. There was other issues that we were going through, schools and other funding of other projects, so this kind of just stayed in the shadows. Last year, funding was approved to carry the plan forward, and one of the first things that I told the council in the RTM is that we will take a step backwards. We need to bring to this council what has been done, what is the condition of the bridge, what has been done, and then seek guidance on what alternative or other alternatives that this council would like us to look at. It could go back as far as having more stakeholder meetings with the public, because it has been a while for that. So with that brief introduction, let me turn it over to Jim, and he'll go through the presentation, and of course, we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. So as you heard, the Groton Long Point Bridge is the only vehicular access to not only Groton Long Point, but also the Mumford Cove area of town. Over 700 homes rely on that bridge, not only for a way to get to and from their homes, but also as their evacuation route if there's an emergency. Now, there are two other opportunities, but not public accesses, that get you across the Amtrak line. One is an emergency access bridge. It's a very small truss, as it says, emergency access, on the north side of Mumford Cove. And the other is an underpass, a small underpass that'll get you under the Amtrak Railroad. But as this graphic shows, it's very clear the importance of this bridge plays to accessing both those neighborhoods. A little closer view shows Palmer's Cove to the north, Fisherman Restaurant to the right, and the town beach to the lower right. So as we go back to the beginning of when this project started, we put a lot of emphasis on reaching out to the public. We wanted to hear from them, their thoughts, their concerns, and use those as we looked at options on addressing not only the bridge, but the causeway. So back on August 30th, 2012, we held a public listening session. We wanted to hear people's concerns about the bridge. We wanted to talk to them about staying informed. And in fact, at that time, we introduced a website, which is still active, and I encourage you to visit it. It's the GrotonLongPointBridge.com website. In that website, it not only gives an opportunity to learn about the background of the project, progress that we did to date, but the results of the public listening session and the concerns that we heard. And one of the concerns was the stability of the causeway. We also heard other concerns from boaters. Many of the boaters were concerned about the rising sea level, the limited clearance under the bridge. We heard from environmental people, their concerns. And also we heard from the public a number of safety concerns. So we brought all those together, summarized them, and factored them into our process. And what's interesting is almost 2 months to the day after the August 30th, 2012 meeting, Hurricane Sandy came through, and it actually overtopped the causeway. Not by much, but it did. There was some wave action. The town did an engineering assessment of the damage that was done, and it just proved that how vulnerable this could be. And there was minor damage that required repair, but it brought the importance of not only addressing the bridge, but also the causeway. So then fast forwarding 6 months later, we held another public meeting, number 2. And at that meeting, we reported what we found. We summarized the concerns we heard in meeting 1. We put some ideas out to the public and basically developed a framework for moving forward. As a result, we developed what we call a structure type study. In that study, we looked at 3 different bridge options, and I'll go through those in a minute. We also looked at pedestrian facilities, from doing nothing to 2 other options, and I'll show you those also. And then thirdly, we addressed the causeway stability, looking at different options for stabilizing that causeway to protect the roadway in another hurricane event. Well, let's backtrack a bit. Why are we doing this? As you heard from Gary, the bridge is in poor condition. You know, the state inspects this every 2 years. They take a very close look at it. They go through a very rigid and detailed inspection process. And the rating of 4 is not a good one. 9 is excellent. 4 is what they call poor. And then when you go down from there, 3 is critical, and 2 is serious. And when you're in a serious category, you're talking about closing the bridge. So you're getting closer to the bottom of the scale. And that is what's motivating us to do something. The substructure is what holds up the bridge. That's rated 5, but the overall condition of the bridge is considered poor. If you look at what's out there today, this is a drone view. The roadway width going curb to curb on the bridge is 30 feet. That gives you 2 12-foot travel lanes, and there are 2 shoulders that are about 2'11", almost 3 feet each. The span, that's the distance across the water, is about 50 feet. And so that is a starting point. We looked at replacing it in kind with no sidewalk. And what we ended up with in this illustration is two 12-foot lanes and two shoulders on each side, 4.5 feet wide, about 1.5 feet wider than what's there today. There's a suggested aesthetics treatment shown here. It's an open rail design. It has some pilasters. It has some ornamental lighting on it. So the intent was to show that in the design process, we could give you an aesthetically pleasing structure to go along with the area. And also, you notice that stone, that's just one option for a causeway protection method. And if I could just mention, it's probably not as extensive as it looks in this picture, but the point is that is one option for stabilizing the causeway. So alternate one is no sidewalk. We moved the alternative two. We heard from some folks in our public listening session about the idea of having some type of a pedestrian platform. So in this alternative, it's the same bridge I showed you in one, except it adds a separate pedestrian bridge to it. The same span over the waterway, which is a little wider than what's there in the area of about 60 feet. And the third alternative is the first one I showed you, but widened to accommodate a 4.5 foot wide sidewalk, the same kind of sidewalk you'd see on a lot of bridges in town. Again, the two 12-foot travel ways, 4.5 foot shoulder, and a sidewalk on one side, 4.5 foot wide. So those are the three basic alternatives that we looked at this point. How do you build this? The most feasible way to build this is to introduce an alternating one-way flow pattern controlled by traffic signals. I'm sure you've been through those. In this case, we're fortunate the alternating distance is about 300 feet, which makes the signal somewhat efficient. Thanks to the help from the town police department, we conducted traffic counts this past August. It showed us what we thought it would. Friday's pretty busy, Saturday's a little less busy, and Sunday's busy, and weekdays it drops. But with those volumes that we examined in the critical period, summer months, we could accommodate handling alternating one-way flow. One of the other things we're going to examine during our design is what we call rapid construction techniques. You may have seen somewhere you build this massive structure off-site, let's say in the parking lot behind the fisherman, and then you wheel it over and drop it in place when you're ready for it. That minimizes downtime, and those are one of the examples of something we're going to look at as we go into the next phase of design. But basically, we will have the first season we'll demolish and construct one portion of the bridge, and then when you go into the second season, using more conventional methods, you'll reverse the flow. Traffic will be on the newly constructed piece, and you'll be building the other half, if you will. So at the end of 2 seasons, construction will be completed. Again, this is a very conceptual plan for how we could handle traffic. What's important to look at is a timeline graph. If you look at where we are today, if we started preliminary design in the coming months, we could have it finished certainly within a year and give us the information we need to develop a referendum to process during 2020, and then bring it forward in November of 2020 for a bonding. And then at that point, if approved, we would go into this final design in the spring of 2021, finish the final design in 2022, start construction in spring of 2023, and with a 2-season job finish in 2024. It's pretty amazing how quickly the years add up when you look at this typical timeline for a project like this. So funding options, and that'll have an effect on that timeline I just showed you. One option is to go with federal funding, and there are some options available under what's called the Highway Bridge Program. It's an off-systems, this is considered an off-system bridge, so it's eligible under the Local Bridge Program. That provides federal funds for 80% of the cost and town funds for 20% of the cost. That could be one of your bonding options, is to cover that 20%. The other way to go, which would change the schedule drastically, is town funds. So if we were designing this to town funds, we would design it to town standards, state standards, and federal standards, but we wouldn't be subject to the reviews in the federal funding process that gave us that timeline you just looked at. Design would be much quicker. We would get it on the street and bid it in a quicker time frame. So those are two general bonding options for you to consider. The federal funding process is easy to apply for. We've had a lot of experience with it, and you would get a response probably within 4 to 6 weeks of your application. And then it's a question of availability of funding. So last, what do we need and what are we asking for? You saw quickly 3 different alternatives: no sidewalk, a sidewalk, and a boardwalk. 3 different ways to handle pedestrian traffic. Under all 3 scenarios, we had a 12-foot lane and 4.5-foot shoulders. So that's one option on a table, is to decide which alternative. Project limits, one thing I didn't talk about in detail, but there has been a rise in sea level, as we've heard. Since this bridge was built in 1935, it's been published that the sea level is about 9 inches higher than it was when it was built. We would design this for the next 100 years, so we're adding 10 more inches to that, just as a rough number. So that's something we'd address. So the project limits will be based on how much higher we have to make the bridge, but we will minimize the approach work and blend into what's there. The extent of causeway stability, that's something we need to look at. How much we stabilize that causeway and how far we go with it. Well, another item that's important to look at is utilities. If you could see from this photo that's up now, it shows you the overhead utilities, and that basically provides electrical, power, service, telephone, and cable television to both Groton, Long Point, and Mumford Code neighborhoods. It also provides a service to Fisher's Island, an electrical service on one of the poles. So it's critical. It's a critical power line. Right now it's overhead, it's exposed. One option we have is to put it underground, and there's 3 advantages to that. One is putting it underground minimizes its exposure to potential storm damage. 2, when the contractor is building this new bridge, it removes a serious safety handicap from them when they have cranes and equipment out there. Will give them much more flexibility of lifting materials over the water as opposed to stopping traffic and having to lift them over the roadway. And then the last, removing them has an aesthetic value to it. Putting them underground will make it aesthetically nicer to complement the area. So if we go forward through the federal process, one of the things we'll do when we finish preliminary design is hold another public meeting. Just like the kind we've had, we'll continue the process. We'll report back to the public what we recommend, why we recommend it, and we'll ask for their opinion. So in that, we will be having another public meeting, and I'm sure we would have one even under the town funding scenario after we've done the next phase of design. So that completes my presentation.
Jim, maybe you can just, like it's everyone's mind, is about how much, what's the cost for neighborhood?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, we haven't completed a detailed engineering study like any good contractor. They fear what happens underground. We haven't designed a pile-supported system. That's a big cost. So, but just using general numbers for this size bridge, it's in the neighborhood of $4 million. If you wanted to add that walkway we saw under alternative 4, that boardwalk, that's about $400,000 for that structure. Of course, plus or minus $100,000 depending on the materials you use. And lastly, to add a sidewalk to the bridge is going to add about $200,000 to that first alternative without a sidewalk. So it's just a rough number, and I apologize for not being more detailed, but I'd also like to do more engineering. I mentioned the overhead utilities. That's a big number when you put those underground, but it would take some coordination with the owners of those utilities to get good estimates to give you a number. And of course, that's what we would do if that was an alternative you want us to pursue.
I have 3 questions. I'll start. So the first thing I noticed is all 3 versions seem to be the same height. And you said at the end you were only elevating it 10 inches. Is that something that could change if we find that we feel it should be higher? This bridge is going to last how long? 20, 30, 50?
We've designed it for 100 years.
Right. So is 10-inch going to be enough height to get us through 100 years? This is one of my concerns. The second thing is if the underground utilities are put in place and we go with the federal bridge funding, is that covered and reimbursed?
Yes.
Okay. And then the third thing is the stakeholder meetings. I know we definitely want to have people come in because we've been hearing from the public about this. Does it fit with your timeline? Like how soon do we have to have the next listening session, if you will, in order to meet your timeline that's in the book here?
Sure. Let me start with the last question. If you look
Okay.
at the timeline, okay, so 1 year to do preliminary design, I'm being very conservative. We have a lot of horsepower, we have a lot of talent. We could get that design done a lot quicker. That's not how long it takes us to design, it's how long it takes me to get a design through the review process and have all the reviewers comment and get consensus on what we're doing. But where I show finishing the preliminary design, that would be a good target date for the next public meeting. So we would hold a public meeting at the end of preliminary design.
I would prefer to have it before that. That way we can hear from the people in
Absolutely.
Groton Long Point, the people in
Yep.
the rest of the town that are interested in the sea level rise.
Sure.
So that's my personal preference. I don't know what the rest of the preference of the council is.
There's no rules to that. We could do whatever you want. Absolutely, yeah. If you want it sooner, that's not a problem.
We could schedule something for in the next 30 days, because we have the basic information here. It's taking that, not step backwards, maybe a step sideways, and we could present the information again with the same boards, have a listening session. Those work out really nice, where the engineers, staff is there to listen. We're not there to coach or guide or lecture. We want to listen. And the boards would be there to present what we have, what the findings were from the first two ones, but the next 30 days would be possible to, again, get the information out and get the input back to the town council.
That would be great.
As you could tell from the process we've followed to date, I personally feel it's very important to get public input. That's why we went through the website. That's why anyone could log on our website and submit a comment that we would respond to and listen to. We want to hear those comments, and that's why we put ourselves out, and we'll continue to do the same. And I don't like saving it up for one public meeting at the end when I get all done. The sooner you learn about things and could address them, the better. So that hopefully we addressed your question about the public meeting. So we're wide open to when we could have them. Sure.
And the other question about the height
vertical
of the
clearance.
bridge.
Yeah, that's a good comment. So if you look at this photo, it does a good job of showing you the profile of the roadway is fairly flat, if you will. And because of that, we could easily accommodate a 10-inch rise, a 15-inch rise in the profile. We would make our bridge as thin as we possibly could, but the finished grade, if it does have to come up, we have an opportunity to blend it in within a reasonable distance. The only thing I want to caution you on, going back to what we experienced in Hurricane Sandy in 2012, the roadway was overtopped, not by the high water, but by the wave action. But where it overtopped wasn't at the bridge. The bridge is actually 1.3 feet higher than a low point that is just west of here. There's a couple houses west of here that is the actual low point in the profile. So when we draw this up and look at a view of the roadway as if you cut it in half and looked at the side of it, it's lower just to the west of the bridge. And so in a flood event, it's going to overtop the causeway and not the bridge. And in that Hurricane Sandy, it came up to the bottom of the opening, but never over the roadway. And if you raise it more, it's the causeway that'll overtop ultimately. So in an evacuation scenario, you want to get across the causeway, not the bridge, because that'll flood first, along with many other streets.
So does this address that?
Yes, we could. There's not a lot of opportunity to raise the causeway because of the proximity of the homes without serious impact to them. So that's why one of the bullet items here is the extent of causeway stability. How involved do you want to get to address that profile grade, and how far do you take that vertical correction? And that's something we would do in a preliminary design. We could submit a number of scenarios with impacts and make a decision.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Councilor Heed.
I have a couple questions. The first, I think it's really important that you have a pedestrian way, like either a sidewalk or the separated, the wooden structure it looks like on the side. I'm not sure if that would be the right side to put it on. If the waves are coming along, maybe it would be better to put it behind the bridge. But that being said, I'm reading the Plan of Conservation and Development, and one of the pretty consistent themes that goes through it is you need to provide alternative ways for people to commute and to get around town. And so to have that pedestrian portion, I think, is critical. So I very strongly support that. On top of that, I've ridden bikes across bridges before, and you don't want to be squeezed on the bridge. You have nowhere to go. So that being said, when it comes to a sidewalk or something like that, a sidewalk or the separate structure, are we as the town having to plow it during the winter time, remove the snow, that kind of thing?
With the ordinance that we have, we're supposed to, the abutting property owners are supposed to clear the walks. I can tell this council we don't clear 10% of the walks that are abut public property. In this location, we probably wouldn't. At a point in time, if it was a bike lane 10 foot wide, we probably would. If there was really a need for, we would get there days after, but this is not, I wouldn't think, one of the prime locations in the winter to plow that walk. We have the boardwalk on the Pequannock River. We don't plow that. Parks doesn't plow that either. So we do have these areas where there are boardwalks or walkways that we just don't have the opportunity to touch during every snowfall. So the simple answer is this probably is not one of those prime locations.
All right. And then the second question is, there is another way that you can get across it. It's an emergency access bridge and also an underpass. Given rising sea level, possible storm damages, would it be better to consider an alternative way to get to and from GLP?
Just a couple things. The emergency access bridge there, if you've been out there, we have constructed a bikeway. It's a back of our wastewater treatment plant that goes down the utility easement. It is a walkway, it's a bikeway, it's a bike path. Groton Utilities uses it to maintain their pole line, but it does go into that walkway there. There's a couple steel columns that are welded in there to prevent vehicles from going across the bridge, I mean really light vehicles. If there was an emergency, we have taken a look at cutting those columns out, but that's just for light vehicles, to get a gator, an all-terrain vehicle over, so that would be the types of vehicles we there. We could transfer by gurney if there was a medical issue, having staged some of those resources on the Mumford Cove side, the Groton Long Point side, and actually transfer people over. But there is a fairly stable bikeway down there that we can get heavy equipment in, but it's getting it over the tracks. And upgrading that access there would require Amtrak and Amtrak approval, and that's, I suppose, doable, but then it just lands on Mumford Cove. So that is an emergency access. That underpass, I call it like a cow chute, a cow path. That will flood. But the emergency access bridges, if you haven't been out there, there's a bikeway out there, and it's really nice. It is really possible to get people and supplies across using like a gator or a small all-terrain vehicle.
Sorry, one more. Could you clarify what you mean by it would fall on Groton Long Point if there was some interaction with Amtrak?
Oh, I think if what I was trying to mention, it was if assets were on Groton Long Point side to transfer emergency people, either with their own fire department or something else, we could get the people on a gurney or whoever is in a situation to one side, have a full ambulance on our side meaning the eastern side of that underpass, and then transport people out of there or supplies over. So it does end in Muffler Cove area there, but it just kind of, that path just kind of ends there. There is no physical connection per se to the road network in Muffler Cove. It could be made. There's a bike path that then circles into Bluff Point, but that is an access point that if the bridge goes down and we have to get people in or out, we could get them in or out. It's just that it's not for large vehicles. It won't be for any emergency. None of the emergency vehicles could go over that emergency access bridge. It just isn't big enough.
Thank you.
Counselor Atwater?
I have a list of questions. I'll try to put it in some sense of order. First question, on the public hearings that you held, was there a good turnout? I mean, was it worthwhile to really rely on those to get information?
Absolutely. I don't recall the numbers, but I like the quality of comments that we got from people. It's interesting to hear each one's concern, whether it was a boater or someone that was a pedestrian or someone that was concerned about safety. Everyone came with their concerns. They were genuine, they were real. We tried hard to understand them and to document them and to respond to them. And that's what public meeting number 2 did, was show, acknowledge them and do our best to respond to them. So I'm sorry I can't give you numbers on it, but we also, you know, what's nice today is we're all busy, but we all have time to access. And that's what's nice about that website. If you don't have time to come to the hearing, you could read and look at the presentation that we gave, and you could send in your comments, your questions, your concerns, and we would respond to them. Just the same as if you were present at the hearing. So it makes it easy for people, and even for those that can't get here, it gives them the opportunity to comment online and provide input.
Okay, I'm a bit concerned that the design time takes roughly the same as the construction time, 2 years each. I mean, you may be right. It just, to me, that's hard to grasp that it takes that long for the design.
So yeah, that's a good comment too. And I guess if I wanted to be more detailed, I would have given you 2 schedules. One is with federal funding and one without. With the federal funding, we have to follow a procedure with a number of submittals at certain intervals, which are reviewed by Connecticut DOT for conformance to their standards and federal standards. So it's that review process that takes place, and the coordination extends the timeline. When we're doing designs that go straight to construction in partnership with a contractor in what we call design build, that's a 3-month design time. And we've done designs like that in that amount of time. But it's more of the administrative design time.
You're sort of leading into my next question, which is nice. You talked about the funding of 80%, 20% if you use federal. If you're talking roughly a $4.5 million project, if we do bonding in the town, it's the cost of $4.5 million. If you do the federal, it's only costing you about $1 million. What is the big difference? I mean, not only in going through the review process, but do you also risk the possibility of not having the federal funding available when you finish all of that? I mean, do you have to wait another 4 or 5 years for the funding once you've finished all the design and approvals?
You know, one of my colleagues used to run that program for DOT for 8 years, so I have a very fortunate resource. You've met Joe Scalise, and he made it clear to me that once there is a commitment to fund this project, which takes place in the application process, then you will get your funding.
Okay.
That it's budgeted and placed. I'm not familiar with any times when that didn't happen, although with what's going on in Washington these days, nothing would surprise me.
Well, so, and then I have two questions about the physical structure. 4.5-foot sidewalks, are those ADA compliant?
Yeah, all of our design is required to be ADA compliant, and a 5.5-foot sidewalk is the DOT standard for sidewalks. The 4.5-foot pertain to the shoulder area, and the shoulder area could be construed as a bike lane requirement. Bike lanes have a dimension of between 3 feet and 5 feet. So a 4.5-foot wide shoulder could be considered a bike lane, and it falls within that 3 to 5 foot requirement.
Okay, and my last question is, is you said that since 1935, the sea level rise has been 9 inches. Was the bridge built in anticipation of that in 1935? Or I'm asking, really, do you have to raise it 10 inches now, or do you have to really raise it 19 inches?
We would, there was another concern that came out loud and clear in our public involvement process, and that was from boaters that wanted greater clearance for their interest. So there's, that was one factor in how high do you make the bridge. We would certainly follow whatever directive the town wanted us to. You know, at some point, you have to be reasonable with how high you want to raise it and how much impact you are going to make to abutting property owners. One of the concerns is to the west, you have homes that are very close to the roadway. There's not a lot of opportunity to raise the grade in front of those homes without impacting them. So that would be a balance, that would be a factor in design, is balancing those competing needs. But back to your comment or question about 1935, I've never found evidence where there was discussion about rising sea level back then.
I wouldn't think so, no.
And as to whether that counted for anything. I was involved in an interesting lawsuit, Town of Westport versus State of Connecticut, and I was on the State of Connecticut side working with the Attorney General's office, defending that issue about navigable clearance of a bridge. And ultimately, the state lost, the town won, and the bridge had to be raised to accommodate a loss of vertical clearance.
And then my last question about all of this is, if you do raise the bridge 10 inches, 19 inches, whatever, but you can't raise the causeway and you get flash flooding, you've got a bridge to nowhere because you can't access it. How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
Well, let me try this. It's in the events that we have, it's going to be the wave action or the water coming in during an event, the storm surge. And real simple in my mind was the water comes in, the water goes back out again. What I want to make sure is that when the water goes in and comes back out again, that it's armored, that there is a roadway, there's a structure underneath. It's not like the deltas of the Mississippi River where they flood for months and you just can't get in and out. So what we were looking at, what we told our design engineers, to try to raise it as much as possible, get the clearance as much as possible, but we are really concerned about those homes on the western side. They have driveways that go right up to the road that are already pitched up. There's a point that you just can't bury those driveways. You just can't make it uninhabitable. So the issue would be is to raise it as much as possible. On the east side is fairly good because we own the land, but it's on the west side. So that causeway would be armored so the water can go back and over. And really during those events, during the storm surge, you should be out of the area or shelter in place. So that would be the thing. But raise as much up as we can and then armor it so that wave and surge action can go over and then recede back as quickly as possible. And then we can get vehicles and people to and from.
Thank you.
You answered one of my questions in that whole discussion. Councilor Zepari.
You give a timeline to complete the project in 2024. That's at least 5 years from now. Now, there are some very large vehicles, I'm sure, that go over that bridge. I'm sure moving vans bringing people in and out of those houses. And delivery vans carrying material to the marinas and the restaurants on the west side of that bridge. What's the rate of decay? How soon will this bridge actually be a hazard to any kind of transportation?
That's a very difficult question to answer. How much time do you have? Let me go back to the rating. It's rated a 4. That's called poor. It's got a ways to go before it's critical where you're posting it. And even then, in a scenario where we've had bridges that deteriorated to a point where they required posting, meaning they couldn't handle the legal load limit, there are usually engineering fixes that we could do temporarily to address that specific issue to buy you time until such time your project is ready. So if, God forbid, something came up in the near future, something failed on that bridge, we'd come up with a fix that would repair it and get it back up to legal load rating to buy us time to get to where we could replace it.
How often are we inspecting that bridge for the areas of decay?
It's a good question. The Federal Highway Administration requires every bridge in the state be inspected every 2 years, every bridge over 20 feet be inspected every 2 years. Now, if this bridge were posted, any bridge that's posted restricting legal load limit, then it falls into an annual once-a-year inspection.
Well, considering the fact that this is already, would you say critical at level 4?
Negative, poor.
Poor.
Yeah, critical.
It's already poor. Shouldn't we be inspecting more frequently than every 2 years?
You know, according to, again, federal guidelines and state guidelines, they feel comfortable that poor is every 2 year inspection is adequate for a bridge rated poor. I can't defend that decision, but I do know that's their guideline. I do know the people that are involved in that process, and it's just, again, it's dictated by federal guideline.
Yeah.
So somewhere when they established those ratings, they were comfortable that with a 4, you're okay with every 2 years.
I have another question that's away from this a little bit. Early in the presentation, if I heard correctly, you mentioned that we had appropriated money a year ago for design.
Yes, that was $300,000. But
$300,000.
Correct.
And that money was not expended for what it was appropriated for.
yes, it was. It was to bring the engineer back on board, AECom back on board, to present to the council and follow the council's wishes to carry this forward. If the council doesn't want to carry this project forward, then the rest of the funds aren't expended. But we did enter into a contract with AECom for them to dust everything off, to take a look at the current federal funding, and to come and make this presentation to the council, and then follow whatever the wishes of the council.
This isn't a $300,000 deal, though.
No,
Well,
not at all.
the only thing I'm driving at, and I would like to create a new culture or a change in culture if we can, and that is when we appropriate funds, we immediately take money out of the taxpayer's pocket. If you know that you're probably not going to need those funds that year, how about waiting until the following year, or when you're going to actually need them and want to expend them, to ask us to hit the taxpayers up for that money? I think it's an important concern, and we have to be constantly aware of the fact that when we take money from taxpayers, we take away their freedom, because that no one does anything that they want to do without paying for it. And so as we take away money, we take away freedom. And we have to be acutely aware of that as we ask for funds from the council, that we don't ask for something that we're not really going to go ahead with that year. So that's the only comment I wanted to make. And as I said, I'm not trying to chastise anyone. As I said, I'm trying to create a new culture. And that's about it. Thank you.
Mr. Burt wanted to say something.
Gary, my understanding is as long as we get direction on where to go, that money will be expended this year. Is that correct?
Correct. We will do the next phase with AECom, which would be start the preliminary design.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Sure. I just asked Gary, as long as the council gives some direction soon on which way to go, that $300,000 will be expended in this year. And Gary went through exactly what this process would be, including this presentation, and so it's exactly what was requested. So.
Thank you. Councilor Heed wanted to ask another question, but if anybody else who hasn't spoken yet would like to. Councilor Aubrey and then Councilor Heed.
Help me a little bit with the process. When we'd have to go to bonding for the portion that we needed, correct?
Well, it depends. If we had 80% and we were down to 20%, there's a chance of not. But I wonder too, what's the odds of getting the bridge funding? Do you think there's a good chance of getting those federal dollars?
Again, I'm relying on my colleague that ran the local bridge program and his experience in that program, and he thought that this bridge is a very, very good candidate. And if you go back to the characteristics of this project, one is, as the very first thing I said, is how critical this bridge is to over 700 homes, not only for access, but for evacuation. And then it's clear through inspection results that the bridge is in need of repair.
So-
And it's also, excuse me, it's also clear from our work that it wasn't feasible to repair it, but to replace it. So when you look at all these, it stands as a good candidate for funding.
So if you were down to $1 million, that would be a lot different than $4 or $5 million. So a lot of it depends if we get that grant. If you're talking $1 million, you're talking about the same ballpark as the police radio system. You know, you could do it through the road bonding. You know we'd have a lot more options with $1 million than we would with $5 million. So we have to see if we get the grant.
If we got the federal program.
Right.
Okay.
If I could just add one more thing, excuse me. One of the other things DOT will look at is they are very, very much in favor of public involvement process. And because of what's been done to date and how it's been done, this will be viewed very, very favorably by the department against some project that does not have that public involvement process in place.
And it's obviously critical.
The point that I was trying to get to is from what Joe is saying, you know, we have to know that we have the money before we can do what we hope to do. So there's a balance that, you know, sometimes you have to get the approval for the bonding. The bonding doesn't happen right that time. So there's always going to be a gap.
Right.
Am I correct?
I think you have to have a certain amount of engineering done to present to get the grant. So I think, you know, we're in that piece. We need direction on what to present for the grant. So once we get through this first process,
Yeah.
we apply, and then, you know, we kind of wait then to see what the results are. So.
And if I could just add too, everything the town has done, starting with selecting us and the process they followed, adheres to federal guidelines, which makes all that eligible for funding.
Okay, that's what, no, I'm feeling comfortable with what you're saying and your explanation of your feeling confident that you're going to be able to put it through. I'm just trying to reiterate the fact that sometimes we have to get the money before we do the project.
Oh, yeah.
So there is always going to be that period of time, Joe, where you can't spend the money. You have to have the process. So, also, I wish I could remember his name, but I can't. But there's a gentleman that's working in the United States now. They call him the Waterman. And he's designing things that would make it so you don't change bridges. You change what's in front of your bridge. Have you read about that at all?
I'm not familiar with that.
I'll do some research.
But it sounds
on
interesting.
I beg your pardon?
It sounds interesting. I'm definitely going to pursue that.
Yeah, it was one of those things, you know, you see it on 60 Minutes and you go, wow, you know, and it's really very progressive. And it's the way they're trying to work with bridges now, where you put something that, you know, that comes across when you expect a big storm that protects the bridge, then goes away afterwards. In this case, I think we kind of need something that protects the areas that are not the bridge, but it would be something to look at.
You know, when we looked at storm surge, one of the things that I found interesting to learn was Fisher's Island is your friend. It does a lot to resist impact that had it not be there, it would be a much different ballgame.
Is that Groton Utilities that takes the power out there?
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor Heed?
Yeah, three questions. Thinking about the boaters, is there an option for like a drawbridge? And is that prohibitively expensive in comparison?
Of course there is, but you know, looking at any movable bridge, it's a very, very expensive bridge to build, operate, and maintain. So the marine traffic demand would have to be there. And I don't know that the use would warrant the cost. And the other side of it is the interruption to traffic. So it's this constant battle, and I've heard both sides of it. The motorists suffer. Well, we're quite familiar with the Mystic Lift Bridge. You hear both sides of that, the boater side and the traffic side. It's certainly possible.
I doubt that the depth in that cove would accommodate vessels that would need a drawbridge.
I agree.
Anything
I was
with a
just
keel.
asking.
It is shallow, yes. It is
Anything with a
shallow.
keel isn't going to get in and out of there. Or, even a large cruiser probably would want to avoid that cove. We're small motorboats that come in and out.
Do you have other questions you wanted to go?
I did have two more. On the, if we were, for example, to do nothing, what's the legal liability?
If we do nothing,
It's always an option.
I know Gary might be, because I don't know the whole process for keeping it going. Obviously, if you did nothing, I mean, we're going to make repairs and keep it going as long as possible. I mean, if you're talking true nothing, then you've got liability of not taking care of residents and emergencies and, trying to get casualty, injuries, people to the hospital, that kind of thing. But
Right,
they're-
and that's right. Excuse me, and along with that, as Jim had said, is once the bridge starts failing to a point, we could do a couple of things. One is with emergency work for the engineering firm to patch it together again. If there was a sudden failure, then it's not the panic, but the need to bring a portable bridge in. And there are portable bridges out there, panel bridges and that can be launched. They are expensive, but we could put something in, but that's a temporary fix too. So if something did fail immediately, it'd be try to fix it. If there was a failure, then we put a temporary bridge in. You have to find that, procure it, and you're talking big dollars. And again, that's a temporary fix.
All right, one more. And then on the sidewalk versus boardwalk option, assuming federal funding, the cost difference to the town is $50,000 for the sidewalk and $100,000 for the boardwalk. Is there any advantage or disadvantage to either one of these options in terms of longevity or maintenance?
Anything that isn't wood is better. If it's a concrete sidewalk, it's a little easier to maintain. But that walkway was also probably, not probably, would be used as a fishing platform too. So that is something, and you do want a concrete structure there or something that more fits I don't want to say a nautical theme, but wood is a lot of a softer thing to look at. So one that was going to be a walkway, bikes could use it, but it's also as a fishing platform, because as you see now, whoever goes across that, during periods of time there are people fishing from there. And it's always interesting to watch them cast without looking for traffic or people walking or bicycles. It's sometimes amazing that they don't catch something else on land instead of what's in the water. But, and again, a small area there. So one of the things was to put that there, and there was a discussion on which side to put it on. The side that was shown on the Long Island or the Fisher's Island Sound side, there was more land there to put it on versus the other side. But there was a discussion at the public information meetings on which side it would be better on, whether it would be protected, whether there be more people fishing, and then you get talking into tides and everything else. And so we went on the Fisher's Island Sound side.
Councilor Parker.
Going to Councilor He's second question about liability. Doing nothing, would the federal government, I don't know if this is accurate question or a good question, would they fine us for not doing anything about the bridge?
Yeah, I'm not aware of an instance where a town was fined. I mentioned they do these biannually inspections. If, as a result of that process, the DOT determined that the bridge was no longer capable of accommodating a legal load, they would post it and restrict loads based on that posting. That would happen immediately. They would notify you, the town, and start the dialogue of how can we help you get this fixed. So I don't know that you would be fined in a negligent way. I'm not aware of any case like that. I think they would be more inclined to partner with you to fix the problem, even offering options and funding. But I've never known a case where a town was fined.
It's just a question. I didn't think so, but I didn't know if there's any cases you've heard of. Okay.
So I wanted to make one more comment. You're talking about the whole idea of doing nothing. And if the bridge would fail in these expensive options that would be brought in, we have to keep in mind, where's that money going to come from? The amount of money that we keep in contingency every year in case a boiler goes or there's heavy snow or something like that probably would not be enough, I'm guessing, from the way you're describing it, to cover one of these temporary bridges. So I think it would be foolhardy to not make plans to do something to actually repair this, to repair the structure. We'll go to Councilor Zepari, and then I wanted to request something.
Well, the only thing I was going to comment, you may not have a fine from the state, but if that bridge collapses with a truck on it, you're going to have a lawyer filing a suit against the town. And that would be probably a lot stiffer than the fine the state would impose.
Said the attorney. Okay. So how soon can we schedule another public listening session that Mr. Schneider described?
We can do it pretty quick. We probably want to get something in the paper to make sure, that's adequately noticed.
Do you think February?
Within a month or so we could do it, but
February?
Can anybody think of a good time or date or event that they'd want to hold it at? Do we use it, do a separate event, or do we do it in conjunction with something else?
And the last time we did it, I do believe, what time? It was early evening. I think it's 5 to 8, so people could come from work. I would
Right.
recommend not Valentine's Day. Maybe stay away from that. For several reasons.
Where was that held at?
It was held in this room right here.
I just wonder if there's any room down in GLP to,
Would the casino be available? There's a gentleman from Groton Long Point here.
Actually, Madam Mayor, I'm Mike Flynn. I'm the best.
Would you like to come up, sir?
I think as one of the major stakeholders, there's a lot of discussion that we can go on, actually.
Could you use the microphone and just state your name again, please? And then Mr. Byrd had a question about if there was a possibility to hold the meeting in Groton Long Point. I suggested perhaps the casino, but could you state your name, please?
Mike Flynn, I'm the president of the Groton Long Point Association. As the major stakeholder involved in this, actually, I think there is a little more discussion needs to be done with the stakeholders, probably with the council and the stakeholder itself, because it gets into probably some land issues, and that would prevent this from moving forward at a good rate. So those things should be reviewed, and I don't think they ever were. And there is some pending things that are going on with land with the city, with the town as well too. But having it actually at the casino is a great idea, John. Actually fantastic, actually. That would bring a lot of people in. The bad thing about it is, as you know, Groton Long Point is a seasonal community. A large landowner, but a seasonal community. So most of our community members are not present actually during that time. So having a month time frame to get it set up may not be the best on that part. Some of them come from long distances. But if they knew something was going to be happening at that point there, they may make a trip to do that and come down for their homes in New England area, or even travel actually from up from Florida. So if that's the case, actually, there may be a month or two, actually, maybe 2 or something, March or April may be a better time frame for that purpose, because then more people will be here for discussion.
How does that suit, if we would wait that long, would that be an issue with this timeline?
Well, do you see waiting a couple, 2 months, 3 months?
That's fine.
Okay.
It'd just be more practical.
When do most of the residents, the seasonal residents, come back in March, in April?
No, actually. The
Okay.
Florida residents actually usually show up between April and May.
So, go ahead, I'm
I just
sorry.
wondered, do you send out a newsletter to residents or email or anything like that so you can get the
Actually,
word out?
everything's done through email and
Okay.
actually through all the
So we should be able to
residents.
get word out.
There's 628 homeowners of Groton Long Point.
So, Mr. Flynn, you're suggesting that March would be better than February?
No, I'm suggesting April will be better than February, actually. So if we go actually closer to the April timeframe.
So we're pushing this out 3 more months before anything is done?
Yes.
At least. We might not spend the $300,000 then this year.
I'm just concerned with waiting 3 more months. I mean, this has fallen in our lap now, and now we're responsible for this. What's the pleasure? Councilor Atwater?
I mean, I think waiting 3 months and doing it right is better than doing it in 1 month and doing it wrong. So I don't see a problem with waiting. I mean, it's been waited since what, 2013 or something. So
The rest, how does the rest of the council feel?
I'd rather have the residents here, the owners here, so so we can have an open discussion.
Is that the consensus of the council? You'd like to wait until, you said April?
April, more people will be here.
You're
That's
good
all.
with waiting till April? Councilor Zafari?
There's no question that regardless of what anybody thinks and regardless of what input we get from the community, and we do want the input, there's no question this project has to go forward. And I see some urgency to it. I see, I see this as a bridge that's in poor repair, and I see it as a danger spot. And I would like to see us moving forward expeditiously, and I think that's what you were hinting at as you were speaking earlier. So, from my point of view, the sooner the better.
Councilor Schmidt?
We do have all the comments from the public hearings that were held, so I think that with the existing property owners, plus those owners that live within, say, 50, 60 miles of here would be able to come down and take part of a new public hearing. And a lot of people are in Rhode Island and Providence or Hartford. Some are in Florida, certainly, but I think not all of them are in Florida. I would say to go forward more quickly. I think that would be more important. We do know the comments that were made, and they were lengthy, and they were very good. So I think it's something that we have as a basis that would help us move forward more quickly.
Councilor Heed?
I would also support being expeditious on this issue, but I would also suggest it's the 21st century. Maybe we could do like some online comments, or they could even email letters or statements that could be read at the hearing, so we could get the maximum participation.
Or if we had it here, we could do it would be broadcast live, and we could have people.
And that website could be sent out to people to see it at other times and comment.
Right.
Is it possible to do like live comments through the website for people, like not a call-in, but like a computer chat room or kind of thing?
I don't know if we have that capability. I don't think so.
Could have somebody manning a Facebook page, perhaps. Councilor Atwater.
Well, we're talking a 5-year project, and we're now talking 2 months. I mean, to me, rushing into it. But the other thing is, this was done back in 2012. I would guess that there are a lot of different people that are now residents in Groton Long Point, and just from a public point of view, you want them to buy in. And if you say, well, we're listening to people that were 6 years ago instead of listening to you, to me, that's kind of a slap in the face. And I strongly feel we should wait until the president of the association is recommending April. Why are we taking it upon ourselves to push it 2 months ahead when you're talking about a total of 5 years? Plus, the consultant said that he can probably do the initial designs in less than the year time frame that he has up there. So we ask him to be a little more judicious and push it up and make up that 2 months when he starts doing the designs.
Councilor Weber, do you have an opinion you wanted to give at this point?
Well, I do. I think we're okay to wait the time, and I know it's a totally different situation. It's not the same kind of bridge, but we should be prepared for the fact that we're trying to put, it was not our council, was trying to put a bridge through in Old Mystic, a bridge repair, and it got voted down. So we should anticipate we're probably going to hear from some people in reference to that, because we have not addressed it since it was, I think it was the RTM that voted it down, actually. And that'll probably come back in the process of this.
So do you prefer to move ahead in February, or would you like to wait till April?
I think April's fine.
And Councilor Baumgartner?
I think April's fine. Do you know if the residents so far have seen any of these sort of schematic designs or the report in itself?
No, it was brought to their attention for when I came as president, actually there about 1.5 years ago. That talk was recurring at that point there. Most of the board changes over, actually over a 5 to 6 year period. But the changes of the design actually did change. and the walkways are a lot more dramatic. And I believe that'll have a lot more discussion because of that.
Is there any way we could, through the association, get the report out to that email list of homeowners, and then perhaps you could share that input with the council, CC us on those emails?
Well, actually, we'll send out documentation to the residents actually through an email letter. I'll send that out to everybody to let them know what's going on and timeframes and that type of stuff as well.
Terrific.
Absolutely.
And I think that'll enable us enough time to get some feedback from afar, and then, but for, long story short, 3 months is fine for me.
Okay, and the website that's listed in this pamphlet is still active?
Yes.
www.grotonlongpointbridge.com is still active website, correct?
Yes, it is an active website.
Okay, so perhaps Mr. Flynn could send that link to the website, so this report is there on that website? Excellent.
Yes.
Mr. Burt?
I just would like firm direction on the location. Do we want to hold it down there, or do we want to have it here where it could be videotaped?
I like the idea of it, now that we're talking about this, batting it about, I think it should be videotaped, public, that way it could reach a wider audience, and also it could be on the website for review by people who can't make it that evening.
Okay.
So my preference is here. I know I initially thought down there, but now that you mentioned the technology aspect, I think we probably should have it here. Are we good with it here? It is Groton Long Point Road. Yes.
We own that too. It's okay.
Site video presentation, since we have time to prepare for it.
What do you mean?
A mobile video, I mean, can they go into the casino or whatever and do the video from Groton Long Point?
I mean, I'm sure you could bring a camera there. I mean,
I don't know if it would be live, though. I don't think it would be.
I think we've got it. Oh, no, they just replaced it. They now have these cameras.
I'm sure they probably could.
Well, that's something we could discuss later, but it looks like I was just kind of tracking the opinions, and it looks like the plurality, 4, would like to wait until April. So the consensus of...
I would flip to make that a 5.
You'll make that 5, okay. All right, so then it looks like we're waiting till April. I am concerned with the liability aspect also. I want everybody to know we are trying to move ahead with this, and don't sue us if the bridge collapses. Because we're waiting till April for you. I know, which is why I want to do this right away. All right, so thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. Okay, so we're going back to 5A, Mr. Burt?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going back to item 5A, which is on page 12, I believe. No, I think it's page 22.
22.
Mechanic position, water pollution control. Hold on, I gotta find it. 12. It is 12? That's what I had written down, but then I couldn't find it. Yeah, it is page 12. So no formal action is needed. We just need a concurrence of the council. So this is 2019-1 Fill Mechanic Position, Water Pollution Control Authority. Mr. Schneider.
Okay.
And
this,
Mr. Zagami is here as well.
Yeah. Hi, Bob. I was going to say, and Chris Lund, who has been before the council before, he's the supervisor or the assistant director at the wastewater treatment plant, is in the back to answer any of the really technical questions. One of our mechanics has returned from the Public Works Department, leaving this position open. The job description, we always look at the current job descriptions or the job descriptions of any of the openings that we have that we're recommending to be filled. And the job description is current. It accurately reflects the tasks required of this position. The funding, this is funding 100% from the wastewater fund. So the sewer use fund pays for this position. As in detailed, again, we have over 22 pump stations, 136 miles of pipeline that is maintained by the crew down there, along with all the pumps and all of the other gear down there. We are recommending that this is filled. This position was reviewed by the Water Pollution Control Authority, and they concurred that this position should be filled. If it is authorized, we will then, because it is a steelworker's position, we need to advertise in-house 5 days to see if there's any current employees would like the position, like to be offered this position, and if they're qualified, then be selected for it. If not, then it will go outside to the outside for the outside recruitment process.
Are there any questions about the fill mechanic position, or filling the mechanic position? Councilor Aubrey.
The gentleman or woman that has this job now, are there somebody that's been with you for quite some time?
A mechanic retired. He was, Tom Fontaine was here for, what, 30 years? Almost 30 years, and he was at top level.
So it would be a little bit less expensive?
Correct.
Okay.
Are there any other questions on this position? We need a vote on this, we just need consensus if there's no objection. Councilor Heath.
So it's kind of easy to say it's 100% paid for by the wastewater fund, so it makes it easy for us to approve it. So I feel like I should ask the question, is it a position that we could divide up some of the responsibilities and split it among the existing staff? Is it something that is critical? The person that then fills in behind it, if we promote from within, could that position be looked at as being temporarily not filled?
With that, if Chris would come up here and answer on the technical side, I know over the years we have downgraded the number of positions there. I think this is critical, but as into the technical side.
Chris Lund, Assistant Director of Public Works. So what we had to do last year, in the last couple of years, the EPA and DEEP locally have taken a greater look at the linear infrastructure of all the towns, and they're finding that most towns are lacking in taking care of just your basic pipes and manholes. So 2 years ago, we brought on a maintainer position, and we reclassified one of our mechanics as an equipment operator. And when you see our big yellow truck going around now, they're spending all their time jetting the lines. So as a result, we're actually one less mechanic than we were in the past. So each of these positions that we have, particularly the mechanics, they're all well needed, well justified, fully utilized. And any given day, we have a problem at one pump station on this end of town and one up at Gosco by the Navy base, in addition to regular maintenance. So I would say that, of all my positions, this is certainly a very important one. And there's really no way to divide it up any further.
Councilor, did you want to say?
Yeah.
Councilor Aubrey.
Looking for consensus.
Well, I didn't know if he needed to speak. Go ahead.
Have you ever filmed the inside of them?
Actually, we do that all the time now. So when we set our internal crew that's jetting the lines, they'll go out with the jet truck, and then you may see them running around with another truck with a little trailer on the back now. And that trailer has a camera robot in the back. So they clean, they inspect with the robot, we bring it back and we look at the lines, and then we can determine if there's anything interior that we have to actually go out and fix.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Is there, did you want to speak? Go ahead, sorry.
I did. Is there any kind of technology or equipment the town could purchase in the next few years that could free up some labor to perform, as you mentioned, the jetting of those pipes, or
The pipes, that's a pretty manual, labor-intensive process. So you may have also seen the last week, we have bigger lines that we can't do with our own staff. So if you were tied up any of the traffic right along in front of Town Hall or in front of Aquatic Plains, that was a vendor that we brought in that was able to do the bigger lines. Looking ahead, though, just to answer your question about labor-intensive, we are right now looking at bringing some additional technology into the pump stations over the next 5 to 10 years. That'll give us more remote access. That may help us to reduce some of that. Particularly, I hope that helps us on the overtime side of things by being able to give us remote access instead of having to bring people in when there's a problem. But that's at least 5, 10 years out due to funding it over a stage.
Great. Thank you.
So is there any objection to having this mechanic position filled? Okay, thank you. So we are on to 5B, and this is a civil engineer. Thank you, Mr. Lund. civil engineer's position. And again, no formal action required, just consensus. This is on page 20. Mr. Schneider?
Okay, this is a authorized slot. The person that held this slot has resigned and is working in a town closer to our home, so his position is open. So again, what we did take a look at the job description. The job description is current. It does accurately and reflect the task of this position. This one's funded 75% general fund, 25% sewer fund, because it does do some design work down there. Currently, the department has the town engineer, which is a licensed civil engineer, and one other civil engineer. This would be our second slot. Several years ago, the department had 3 civil engineers and a town engineer, so we have downsized that division. In fact, when I first became Public Works Director, we had 15 people in the engineering division. Right now, we have 5. So what does the slot do? It does several things. One, it does provide support to the Office of Planning and Development Services by helping in the site plan review. When developers or people, either developers for subdivision or sites come into the town, it is reviewed technically by the Public Works Department to see if their engineer is currently adhering to our standards. That means the town standards. So what we provide is that type of review to the boards and commissions. Same thing for the inland wetlands applications, we do that. We also this position also answers calls from the general public and from contractors who are working out there on the existing public works infrastructure. Everything from someone who wants to come in and develop, which would be, what do you have there? What's a sewer? Who do I contact for water? We tell them which water department and that. And we provide advice. We don't detail stuff for them. We provide them advice onto some of the issues that we may have on that site or for infrastructure. And we also then do some small design work and some large design work. For the Parks and Rec Department, we design a lot of their paths, a lot of the bikeways and that we do the design. We can do the design in-house. That gets then put out to bid, or we construct it in-house. Police Department, we do provide support to the traffic authority. There are several instances where the traffic authority is looking at issues either of sightline or placement of signs to standards, and the engineering division provides that support to the traffic authority. We also design and compile the bid documents for the capital improvement programs. Either the smaller projects are designed internally at a cost savings to the town. If not, if we have to go out to a consultant, then these civil engineers act as project managers. They are also then assigned on a larger project to do some of the construction inspection. The division only has 1 inspector, whereas years ago we had 4 inspectors. So these people then leave the office. They did the design work. They're managing the contract. They're also doing the inspection. And of course, they also support the survey and mapping and data collection. Fully burdened, the hourly cost of a full-time employee is about $61 per hour. It's fully burdened. That has all the benefits in. That's the number we get from finance. Consulting engineering firms start at the neighborhood for a junior engineer like this at $115 an hour. So there is a savings there. So what the department is recommending that this slot be filled. It'll help, again, with what we feel is going to be an uptick in the building in this area. The area is going to start seeing an upswing of developers coming in, either site and subdivision in the area. And so we'll be able to support the boards and commissions.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Schneider? Councilor Heath.
Just a comment. You did your homework on this one. Good job.
Anyone else with a comment or question? Councilor Obrey?
Would the person in this position be working with the economic development on the Wayfarer sign project?
Absolutely, because any one of those signs, if it's in a state right-of-way, requires a state permit. If it's in our right-of-way, we would make sure that, liability-wise, and the Wayfarer signs have to have a foundation. That's the type of design work. That's the type of support that would be provided. And then if it's over a certain amount, it needs to go out to bid, so those specifications would be written by this person.
Thank you.
Once again, there's not a vote required, but we just need consensus. So is there any objection to filling of this position? Do you have something else? Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, you
That's all
said
right.
this was a female before?
Yes, it was.
Let's try for that again.
Absolutely. If anyone knows of any civil engineer PE out there would like to come to work for the town or in this area, please do. With EB in an upswing, they're taking a lot of the civils, and also with all the economy booming in the other part of the state, the civils are being taken up by the firms that we hire. So they're not a dime a dozen anymore. But anyone who knows of anyone, please have them contact Bob Zagami's office.
Do you feel what we're offering is compatible?
I do believe so. There are some people out there that like the steady paycheck, don't like the night meetings. If you work for a private consulting firm, you may attend a lot of night meetings. So there are these people out there. We just got to go find them, and we do have a good package here. And we have work that is varied. It's just not the same pipe design. It's varied work.
Thank you.
I have a former student in mind. I'll find out if she's got a job or not. She's amazing. Is there any objection to filling this position?
No.
Okay, so it looks like we're good on that position. Consensus to fill the civil engineer's position. We're on to item 5C, and this is Public Works again. And again, consensus, I believe, let me just double check, to fill the financial assistant 1 position.
This opening and it has occurred because of an in-house promotion, which created this vacancy. Again, now I'll go over the job description is current, it adequately reflects. This one's 100% funded by the general fund. The loss of staff, we have 2 financial assistants here, and what some of the numbers that we have is that we collect over $135,000 in cash for the department. That's everything from plans, the bid specs that we put out, there's a deposit on that too. Most of those are landfill, either day passes or the yearly passes. That's all run through the register up here and reconciled. What's also of interest too is the Public Works Department has about $1.5 million of operations money that needs to have a purchase order, needs to have an invoice, needs to have accounts receivable before it goes on to finance. So what we do is we have to follow policy. We also make sure that the billing is properly here before it goes on to finance for that. So we have about $1.5 million annually that we need to properly account for. And in some instances, have to go out and write small bid specs for. We just can't go ask for a chair. We need to ask for a chair or take a look at if the chair is on a state low bid. So we do that stuff. Our purchasing department does a good job, but there's only 2 people down there. And the Public Works Department has a large volume of stuff. These, what we have listed there is all of the accounts that there is either process payments, check requests, order supplies, and obtain quotes for those following accounts. And it also includes some of our special funds, which is our capital projects, our LoCIP projects, and also our capital programs. Some of the bonded projects are there. A little bit on the school project would be involved because even though the payment, we have hired other people, the payment has to be run through the town system there, so there's one last check to see if there's money in the purchase order, all that neat kind of internal stuff. So this person also works closely with the purchasing agent on the Public Works purchases. As I said, about $1.5 million annually. It's the invoices. Sometimes it's refund paperwork that is done. Either the part comes in wrong and we want a refund, or second, and for some instances where Chris's shop takes a look at a citizen concern that they were not billed properly for sewer use billing, Chris will do the investigation, and in several cases we owe that resident money back, so we need to process that payment back because we have overbilled the person either because of some clerical error down the road. They combine 2 properties into 1, so they only should be billed for 1 lateral instead of 2, so we do that. And of course, we maintain the spreadsheets and usages. Secondary duties, as a person does, we don't have primaries for everything, everyone does 2 jobs, is payroll. We have 60 employees here, but we process payroll. Payroll needs, which is sometimes very easy. If it's a salary person, it's 40 hours or sick leave or vacation. But for the hourly employees, it could be the special work, which is in the contract, or of course the overtime for snow plowing and that, which could go in for days, different pay periods and that. And our goal is to be 100% right, and we're pretty close there. The person who works, they should get what they are not required, what they're allowed to get. Of course, answers phones and answers phones and return messages and provide information to auditors and other departments as requested. The loss of the staff position will require an office hours at the front counter being reduced. Even though the planning department shares the front counter with us, there's a phone there. You call back. The goal from my department is once that phone rings, someone answers and goes to the front counter. That, without this person, I only have 2 people in the back office back there doing this type of work. So that's what would the impact be is to the public. And what my fear is to the process of keeping supplies and equipment going to our operations personnel in a timely manner for them to get work done.
Are there questions for Mr. Schneider on this position? Councilor Heaton.
Actually, for John Burt, is this the kind of a position that at some point we could have all the finance people sitting in one area shared between the departments, or is this not possible?
This one's harder. I mean, it's a very complex, it's a very, very complex department, and they do a lot of other things than just what you would be doing in the finance. I see this one as needing to stay separate, unless you divide it into 2 different positions, but which I don't recommend.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Is there any objection to filling this position?
No.
Okay, thank you. So that takes us to item 5E, which is the capital improvement project for LOTSIP. And this is on page 26.
Madam Mayor, if I could have Jim Platosh come up here and take his equipment away so he can go home to your wife.
Certainly, I apologize.
So I can talk about it, but he'll be up here on Friday.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
I thought he was going to chime in on another item, that's why. Thank you for waiting patiently. Okay, so this is page 26, item 5E.
So I need to make a motion?
This is the one that needs a motion. Yes, this one does.
All right, I'll make a motion to recommend a resolution approving the capital improvement project 50106-5864, fiscal year ending 17 LOTSIP roadways and intersections be canceled. Direct staff to notify the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments of this action and return the remaining funds to the capital reserve designation balance. I so move.
Second.
Moved by Heed and seconded by Zip Perry. Okay.
Where I would like to start is probably in the middle of my referral. The first part of the referral there is just the background, the history, what this project was. But getting on to the meat, the local funds were approved in FYE 17. It was $160,000 for the design and permitting of the Bridge Street Kings Highway intersection improvements is what we called. And to date, approximately $67,000 have been spent on this effort. What this was to do, and if I could, yeah, I'll ask my easel here. Using our pointer from Groton Heights. This is the pointer from Groton Heights, so anyone who went there, we have a couple left. What the initial project was, and it started back in 2008, the Planning and Development Department contracted with a consulting engineer to look at what they called a streetscape in the area of where Restaurant 99 is. It was the northern thing. It's a hodgepodge of roads coming in, of access, of ramps from the highway, and it just looked really industrial, just not a good opening, not a good, welcome to Groton. And so what was done, the project was to take a look at that whole area and develop something that would work on not only visual, but traffic movement, traffic management through the area. So what was done is that and the study was completed of different intersection designs for the ramps and Route 1, and we also took a look at the Bridge Street Kings Highway area and the intersection with Route 1. And what was selected from all of the issues in the downtown gateway was the one area up by the Restaurant 99. That area should be number 1. And what the recommendation was to close off the intersection with Route 1. So if Greg, you could point with that. The option was, or the thing was to close off that intersection because it was dangerous. There are accidents up there. You have a ramp coming off. You're trying to make a left-hand turn. You're trying to make a right-hand turn off of Kings Highway, and it was very busy up there. So if you close that off and provided another access point down on Kings Highway and Bridge Street, that would make it a safer intersection. As we were going through the discussion with the previous town manager and the consultant and ourselves, as we were going through all of the items, it was determined is that the minute that we start touching that intersection up there, the project just starts expanding exponentially with permitting, with costs and everything else. So it was brought away from that intersection with Route 1 and to just take a look at addressing the intersection down of Kings Highway and Bridge Street. What could be done down there, because we knew EB was coming in to the old Caldor site, and they're there now. So what was done is that we went, and this is for lot SIP, so we had to go through the COG, so we put a project together to put this project together. The COG has supported it, not with funds, but has supported it as a lot SIP project, and then we started the design work. So to date, and I know that's a lot in a very short time, to date, what we had come up with is the process would be is to create a new intersection with Bridge Street, which, and it's kind of hard to see there, but it's right in that section down there, and to tee it in, to abandon the current intersection that we have with Bridge Street, and make it more of a focal point of getting into the old Caldor site, the new EB site, and then cleaning up a bunch of driveways in that section. So we did the work, we did the preliminary engineering work, we did some, the consultant did the work, and to date, as I said, $67,000 was spent on it. So the estimated cost, additional costs, are at least $250,000 for right-of-way acquisition and easements. These costs would be considered eligible project costs that we could request from the state to fund through its lot set. The construction costs are currently estimated to be about $1.6 million, but that was in October 2015, and that if you increase it by 2.5% a year, we're in the neighborhood of, it's on the page, neighborhood of probably $1.8 million. There's $125,000 to $175,000 for the construction administration, which is the inspection and managing the contractor. This cost would have to be borne by the town, 100%. The department is recommending that this project be canceled for the following reasons. One, through the whole process here, although the new alignment eliminates a portion of Kings Highway as a paved road, it must remain, as town property due to the existing underground and overhead utilities. So all we're doing is creating a greenway there. The area will become a maintenance burden, and it cannot be used for development purposes. Elimination of this section of the Kings Highway impacts an abutter by requiring traffic entering the property to enter from the remaining Bridge Street access. So bottom line, his front access to the property now becomes a rear access. So the building's orientation is now to that green space and not to a roadway. It will require 2 partial takings and permanent easements from 3 properties. That's the easy part. The partial takings are from a known auto repair fuel dispensing site, auto repair and a fuel dispensing site. It is not known if these sites have issues that would invoke the Transfer Act, meaning that there's pollution and cleanup. The improvement will not add any acreage for development. There's a large piece behind the Caldor site. The rock site is about 19 acres. The state of Connecticut owns it, but it will remain landlocked. There's no way of getting to that. So part of the thought process was here, maybe this could open up the acreage in the back It cannot, because we still have abutting property owners there. It doesn't do anything for that. The movement of traffic is currently working right now through some issues that we had with parking, but it is improved. And it is my feeling that the proposed improvements would not improve the traffic flow or safety in the area. It would eliminate the second entrance to the Restaurant 99 site. We would have to negotiate that. They have a site plan that shows two entrances. It does not address, as I said before, the five-legged intersection up at the top of Route 1, Route 12, the off-ramps of I-95. That would remain unchanged. It would eliminate several parking spaces on Bridge Street, which are a premium right now. That's where the cars are parking, and I know the chief's been out there with his enforcement. And well, from what we have determined is that the LOTSEP funding for reconstructing the parking lots on the abutting property owners would not be eligible. So that's at the bowling alley. Some of the parking lots would have to be reconstructed up there, Restaurant 99 and as such. So it is my opinion that what was a good project to start with doesn't offer any benefit other than to make an intersection, tee into another road. It's working there now. These funds are state funds. They're not been earmarked for Groton. What would require, if the council does approve the resolution here, we would need to contact the COG to cancel the project. But for $1.8 million of construction funds, it is state funds, but for what we would have to put into it, and for the period of time of taking the land, of getting the land, which is easements and purchases, partial purchases, that is a long drawn-out process. We're talking years before we could actually go to any type of construction. So this is one of the projects I have reviewed with the town engineer, and we're bringing before the council for comment or concurrence with the abandonment of the project, or the cancellation of the project.
So for clarification, then, it was $160,000 in local funds, and 67 of that has been spent, so the remainder will go back to capital reserve.
Capital reserve, undesignated fund balance in the capital reserve, correct.
Okay. Are there questions for Mr. Schneider on the cancellation of this project? Councilor Heed and then Councilor Aubry.
Just, I support the cancellation, but just a question. The construction cost of $1.6 million would be on top of what was already spent. Is that correct?
Correct, and that would be state funds. I mean, the state would fund the construction portion, and a portion, they would give us they would take a look at the full project costs, and if the project cost was a construction and let's say $200,000 for land takes, that's what the agreement would be. If the land takes were $300,000, then the money comes from the construction side. But correct, it's 1.6 to 1.8 million, right now $1.8 million, but those are state funds that have not been allocated to us yet, or reserved for us.
Councilor Aubry.
There's two areas that flood in that area.
Yes.
One of them being up where the lights are on Route 1, because they, not right in this area that you're looking at, but up where the lights are by the upside of 99, where all the street lights are.
Yes.
That floods pretty regularly because there's no, when they did 99, they didn't put the runoff into the stream. So there's an area up there that needs to be looked at. Right. The other thing is there's an area that floods down where Kings Highway and Bridge Street comes together pretty regularly. And the other question I might have is, would you put the light back that was taken down at the intersection of Bridge and Kings Highway?
There was a traffic light there, and it was before EB was there, and there was a series of what they call warrants. There's 8 warrants on Wyatt. What the 8 warrants, what you look at is issues at an intersection for a traffic light or for not a traffic light. That section at that time, the intersection at that time, didn't warrant a traffic signal there, so that's why we could take one down. We would need to do a traffic study there to see if it did warrant it, if there were certain warrants or certain criteria that would be met for a traffic signal. Again, we could look at that. That would cost a few dollars to do that. But if there was enough issue of accidents, traffic, turning movements, and those types of items, then a traffic signal could go up. Traffic signals like this, they're about $250,000 apiece. We did one on Briar Hill Road that was just under $250,000, and that was a simple one there. But it's possible. We'd have to do a traffic study to see if it would warrant because of accidents, turning movements, traffic movements, and that. And the state gets involved.
Right now, there's not as much traffic going through there, believe it or not, because of the fact that the highway is not open. So you couldn't do the traffic study now to get any real count.
Correct. If we were to do one, we should, as everything is open there and they get a good count, that could be programmed in. And on the drainage thing, we do know about it. The drainage outlet is plugged. We're looking to see if we have any rights to clean out, which is by the hotel. The drainage line goes through in between the hotel. There's a covered way, and so there's a drainage line. We do know of it. Our line is clear until it hits the outfall or the outlet there, and then it's all silted in and that. So we're looking at who owns it, and then what rights do we have to go clean it out, to dredge it. And then that should clean that area up.
I think if there was an area that you were going to put any money into, and I suppose some people will say I'm saying this selfishly, but when you're coming down from Legend and you're taking the off ramp to go on to Clarence B, the area by there is never attended to by the state. It's a mess.
Correct. And the study had showed that was one of the areas where there should have been some either wayfinding signs or welcome to Groton, that's my word, signs. It's something that identifies, you're coming into the commercial area of Groton, but that was one of the areas that was identified for something more than just a couple junipers and grass that isn't cut.
Right, because when it gets full in the summer, you can't see when you're coming down if anybody's coming up Ridge Street at the four-way intersection.
With that, we'll take a look at. We will call the state to see if they can clear their sight lines, because that's at least that portion is a state responsibility.
Well, I think
you're just being selfish.
I am being selfish. Yes, I am. I'd love for somebody to see my building. No, but no, it's a serious problem in the summer, not now. But I think that when we get everything flowing down there, I think you're going to probably have to come up with something where Bridge Street and Kings Highway comes together, because that becomes a congestion point now. So we'll see.
Okay.
But
Any other discussion on this item? This one we do need a vote on. So seeing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote on 2019-5 capital improvement project. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? So moved unanimously.
maybe I should have stayed.
Thank you.
Can we pause for a second just to let him get his stuff out?
Yeah, I was wondering why the light was still on.
Just dived in.
Yes, we'll recess for 5 minutes.
Jim dived.
Thank you. We're back from recess at 8:31. And we are going to flip the last two items. We're going to take item 5G next, 2018-526-3 town property sale. And this is on page 61, and I believe we are at Councilor Aubry, perhaps? Did you read the last one? So page 61, please.
Very last page.
There you go.
Okay, this spot here.
Just the motion.
Motion to recommend a resolution to approve the sale of a 0.168 acre portion of parcel 260819714055 to Christopher Drake for $2,500 with funds to be deposited in a new fund to be used for cleanup of nuisance properties. I so move under protest.
Second.
Moved by Aubry, seconded by Schmidt. I think that's still official. Madam Parliamentarian? I didn't hear a thing. Okay. Excellent. Is there anything you wanted to add to this? Or it's pretty clear cut. We've discussed this in committee. We held the public hearing. Is there any comments? Councilor Aubry.
I think because of the additional information we've had from other committees, that I could not vote in favor of this tonight without looking into what they're requesting and that being a overall plan for the land in Noank. I know it's a small piece and it doesn't affect things too much, but I think it would be not doing our due diligence if we were to go forward with it the way that it is. So I would recommend that we do, it was referred to in the additional letter we got tonight.
Second paragraph.
Yes. The commission strongly recommends that a long-range plan for the site should be solidified prior to any action being taken. And I do agree with that. And I'm hoping some of the others would feel that it's our duty.
So just for clarification, the council received a letter from the Conservation Commission asking, as Councilor Obrey said, they recommend a long-range plan for the site before any action is taken. This will go on record with in the minutes as well. Is there any further discussion on this? Councilor Zepari.
I know I'm going to burn in hell for this, but I fully agree with Leanne.
First, we should get a bell.
I think we should go ahead with this, this small portion. It's a very small portion of the property. And I believe we have a referral coming up. Have you already made the referral to discuss, Councilor Atwater? You indicated you wanted a referral to discuss Noank?
I have it scheduled for one of the 2 February meetings.
Okay,
I
so-
think it's the first one.
That's, yeah, no, that.
Right, so we have a referral coming up in February. We'll be discussing this in depth as to how this council wants to proceed with the use of that property and what our intentions are. So I would say we should go ahead with this tiny piece that doesn't really impact the rest of the bulk of the property. Is there any other comment? Councilor Atwater.
I would agree with you in the fact that we've been talking about this and we had a public hearing and the Conservation Commission never came and said anything. Now at the last minute, I think we should just go ahead with this small parcel.
2/3 vote.
Councilor Baumgartner.
Now regarding that referral, who has the onus on this one in terms of drafting a policy that deals with our excess vacant properties?
Well, we've got that internal committee. However, with something like this, we'd need input from the council on which direction to take.
Well, I firmly believe that, for one, given the outcry from the Conservation Commission, Zoning Commission, Planning Commission, we have members, or at least folks who have been a part of those commissions, collaborate on this process in large part because they have brought up incredibly valid concerns. While I share the mayor's point of view that this has been discussed for quite some time, I know that we're going to be looking at other properties as well within the areas within the Knowing School, and then obviously the Sealy School and other properties. It's important that I think we include more people in the process, moving forward as we draft that policy. So, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Burt, you said 2/3 is required as
Yes.
per,
Because the planning commission had turned it down.
and that is, what part of the charter is that?
Is that the charter? I think, I'm trying to think is it? State statute, yeah.
State statute requires 2/3 of the whole body in order to overturn a planning commission vote, is what we're to understand?
Yes.
So that would mean we would need 6 votes to pass this. Okay. We've got Councilor Heath next.
So I had a couple of questions. In terms of all the school properties, I guess we need to come up with a plan for what we want to do with each of them. Ultimately, I mean, this currently is being used as a public garden, but if it weren't a public garden, I would think the best thing would be like to know in advance how many lots you get out of it, what's the road proper, would this impact something like that?
The most you could have on there, it's 20,000 square foot lots. It's 6.9 acres, I believe. You'd be able to get 13 lots if everything else had setbacks and everything else worked out. So that's the max number of lots you'd have there. It might be less just because of other factors. But you just have pretty good, and you're not likely to get a zoning change there, so you pretty much know what you're going to have there. Right?
All right.
If you were to do something other than the school.
Mm-hmm. And then who determines like what's happening for all of the school properties, not just this one? Is that something?
Well, we've had ongoing input from the council. It's pretty well defined, by the zoning and what we need on what's happening. But that's part of the report we're going to put together for the council but we're well on the way on most of, we know pretty well what'll go on the other sites.
Mm-hmm. Okay, final question. Mm-hmm. In terms of the 2 letters that we received, I believe it was 2 ultimately. It was Conservation Commission and Planning.
I think it's for the last property, I believe, correct?
The first property had just the Planning Commission. This one has both, right?
So one of them suggests, I believe it's the Planning Commission, that the cost of selling this property or the amount that we would receive in revenue no longer fits the value of the property. Is there any validity to that?
I didn't really, I see what they mean, that the people who would build the garage would have an additional value, but it's not, we have a clear value on what this land is actually worth on its own, so I'm not sure I can see their point, but I'm not sure I completely agree.
Anyone who hasn't spoken? Councilor Parker.
I'm sorry. Because the land is empty currently, so we couldn't charge the person who wants to buy the property for a garage that has not been built. Is that correct?
Well, we can set what we want.
We can set what we want, but
right.
the appraised value of the property could not be appraised correctly without the building being
Not knowing
built.
what's going to be there, correct?
Okay.
Councilor Schmidt or Councilor Atwater? Okay, so for clarification, we have 9 councilors, 2/3 of that is 6. So in order to make this happen, we need the 6 votes in order to pass this evening. So I think I've heard 3 people speak against this, correct? But we need to vote anyhow, so just, anyone else want to persuade or go ahead?
Just to follow up, because you said lots would be 20,000 square feet, give or take?
That's a minimum.
A minimum.
Right.
Does this impact that? It would
very
be
little.
13 now. If we do these 2 small transfers, it's suddenly going to be 12.
Unlikely, but you never know until you get through all. Basically, you'd have to put it out for development and see if there's that left over. I mean, there's not going to be a way to know unless you actually plan the whole development.
Councilor Baumgartner?
Is there any way we can expedite the process that we have to go through to evaluate the criteria used to, determine, sale price or what we're selling for?
We have a process for sale price and all that, and it calls for the appraisal, and et cetera. We have a policy on that.
Well, for sales versus reuse, because while that was called out in the POCD, I sort of see them as 2 separate things. Reuse is obviously talking about whether or not we continue operating that space as the Knowing School Gardens. Sale is dealing with what we're dealing with, and conflating the 2, obviously they're conflated within the POCD, but the recommendations in the POCD, but is there any way we can sort of expedite that process before we maybe tackle that referral in a few months? Or at least setting out, creating a policy?
I think probably the biggest, we could certainly set up a policy. We want some input, but I think the biggest issue is it needed. I think first I would want to hear discussion on what's going to happen with the property as a whole. That would guide a lot of, I guess I'm not quite sure where you're going with it, what we don't have already. I want to go through this other discussion in the future and then see what I can do then. I don't have enough information to know where to go with anything at this point. But.
So for clarification, the property that is proposed for sale is shown in this picture. And they want the additional property for setback?
No, do you see where the boat and car and stuff are?
Yes.
That's actually our property that those are on. That's where they park their stuff.
Okay.
And there's a hill, a steep hill right behind it,
So the other property had the steep
going
hill as
up
well?
to the main part of the property.
So there are two, both properties had steep hill that we're selling off?
Well, that's one piece right there. That's what the
Right.
same piece right there.
I meant the last one that we
The last
sold.
one, really, well, there was a bit of a dip in there. There was a little wood lot there. It's not like this. It's not steep like this is. This is very steep.
Counselor Aubry?
I think we'd also have to be working with the no-wank zoning
Yes.
for anything that was proposed or
Yes.
so forth, so chances are pretty limited of, well, I shouldn't say a good use, but an expanded use.
So that sounds like you're making the argument to go ahead with this then.
No, I'm not. I'm just wanting everybody to realize it's not our usual process.
Right.
You know, we could normally go to planning and say, you know, what do you think? But I don't think we've had any conversations with the no-wank zoning.
No. Other than, there was a large process, that led to the gardens there, a lot of public input. And I would imagine Noe would want a seat at the table again.
Counselor Atwater?
I think looking at this picture and so forth, my first question would be that is this 0.1 something acres, when we're talking about the overall property, which is my real concern, but is this piece going to affect the change of the rest of the property when and if in fact and whatever? But I would like to make very clear that when I ask for a referral for this to be brought back before the board, it has nothing to do with the disposition of the building or sale or whatever of the property. I'm concerned with the stewardship of the group that's supposedly running a community garden. And that's why I asked it to come back. And it bothers me now that we have this little issue of selling a small piece of property down over an embankment when we're all of a sudden discussing the whole sale of all of our properties throughout the town. And I just think we've gotten way off track.
Counselor Schmidt, I don't think you've spoken. Did you want to say anything this evening?
Well, I just think it's a part of the property that was not developable in any event, and that this was just a sloping area, and they wanted to use that for a small portion of their land, and they've been using it evidently, and they want to make it legal. So I think that there's no harm in selling this one little portion that was not saleable anyway.
So I would definitely say if the council did choose that way, whichever way, but that you not entertain anything else until there's certainly a plan in place.
Just if this would fail this evening, can this be brought back?
Yes.
Okay. And it would be brought back at our next COW meeting? It could be.
Well, it depends. Yeah, if it fails, you're probably looking at waiting until you really know what you're doing with the property. So I imagine it's going to be a wait. You're probably going to get through the rest of whatever process you do to decide or look at the stewardship of the rest of the land.
And when did we first get this request from Mr. Drake?
Oh, been quite some time. You
About
probably
the same time as the
shortly
other
into
one.
office. It was
Right.
pretty quick right after that. It's probably been over about a little over a year ago, maybe last December-ish, right about when you started.
Counselor Aubry?
Do we have a survey of this property?
Yes.
The whole thing?
Not the whole thing, just of the pieces, no. There might be something in the, I can't say if there's something in the records before for the whole 6.9 acres. There very well might be. I'd have to check with probably the building department to see.
Probably something from when they did the
I will
survey
check.
to build the school.
I gotta think there's a good chance of it anyways. There's
Barbara's
certainly
as
gotta be
old
a
as the
file.
school, maybe she can tell us.
Counselor Parker had a comment.
I have a question and comment. Can this vote be delayed? Can I make a motion to delay it?
You can table.
I would like to.
No.
I can.
Cannot table in committee of the whole?
Move to a time definite.
Move to a time definite? You can move to a time definite.
When are we discussing?
So,
I understand the concerns of the groups have contacted us, the planning and the conservation commissions. On the same token, this was, as it previously stated, it was brought before everyone for a public hearing. My concern is that we waited till the last minute to hear from these two groups when it was posted and advertised that this was going to happen. I would like for either or both to come to a meeting to sit down and discuss what they expect from us as a town council moving forward. Because having this come to us at the last minute, I have concerns that it doesn't look good for us, and if our people are willing to pay money to increase their property lines, I have a problem them denying people. It is still bringing not much of a revenue, but it's bringing some type of tax base in. So if we can postpone, I would like to make a motion to postpone this until.
I would go to our next regular cow, which is the 22nd.
Correct, I was getting ready to say that, thank you.
Does that make sense, Mr. Burton?
Sure.
I would like to make a motion to postpone until February 22nd to discuss this item.
February or January? You want to wait? Do you want to do it at our next regular cow, or do you want to wait until?
I actually want to wait until after Council Atwater's request is coming.
Right. I
So
think
when
that's
is
on.
that?
I think that's on the. Hold on. I'm pretty sure it's the first
If it's
cow
on
of February. Let me double
If it's
check
the
here.
first cow, then
That's
that's
the
fine.
12th. So then the next cow would be the the next regular cow after,
Yes, I've got it
February
slotted for
26th?
February 12th. So, right, February 26th. Yep.
February 26th?
Mhm.
That's what I would like to do.
can you say it again?
I make a motion to postpone the voting of this item. Let me go back to the page. Item number 2018-526 on the town property sale to February 26th. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's moved by Parker.
Second, I have a question.
Seconded by Atwater. So it's been moved and seconded. Counselor Atwater has a question. Go ahead.
Procedural question. This is a resolution. Wouldn't we have to vote this in a regular council meeting anyway?
Yeah, it'll still come back for. Yeah, it'll be a recommendation to the regular council meeting.
So it wouldn't come up in a council then till March, or first we would, if it would go through at the time definite that you guys just moved,
Right.
it'll come up in March.
If we voted it tonight, then
And
it
it
would.
fails.
Well, no, if we voted it tonight and it was approved, then it would come up in February.
Yes. So
Okay,
it's a
I'm just
1 month
trying to be
delay.
clear.
Yep.
Okay, that's
Okay, is there, I'm sorry, go ahead, Counselor Hughes.
Just to clarify a timeline for the property owners who are trying to buy it, if it gets postponed to February, then there's town council approval the first Tuesday in March. How long does the property transfer take? Are they able to complete the building project before this year? I mean, I think you run up against several.
You know, you probably could do the paperwork, the transfer within a month after that. So let's say by the end of March, and then they would start their. If they, assuming they wanted to start right away, they could start right away at that point on building.
Anything else? So we will vote on Counselor Parker's motion to postpone till February 22nd, 2018-526.
26.
26.
What did I say?
22nd.
Okay. February 22nd. Say it again. We are going to vote.
February 26th.
We are going to vote to postpone 2018-526 until the February 26th cow.
Correct.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so this has been postponed until the February 26th cow. Thank you. 26. Okay. So I believe we have one more item.
Do we have to vote on this? Or is it just a
We
motion?
voted to postpone.
Is that the property owner?
So Counselor Baumgartner, I think, has to leave right now.
It's a young couple that own it.
So 8:53. Thank you, Counselor Baumgartner.
No, he's not doing it. I think maybe Bob or something.
All right, we are on to item 5F, 2019-6 Mystic Streetscape Phase 3 update on page 28. And for clarity, there is no motion. This is just for information this evening, and Mr. Schneider is going to provide us with some information.
Okay, the town of Groton had completed Mystic Streetscapes Phase 1 and 2, and after we completed the second phase, the state had notified the town that there are funds remaining to complete a smaller Phase 3. They did offer the funds to Stonington, and at that time Stonington said that they didn't have any need for those funds, so they offered them to Groton. What the funding source would be is from the federal high priority project grant funds. These are earmarked for this area, for the Mystic area. It's an 80% federal, 20% local match. The state right now, I've been talking to Bill Grant, the project manager at the state. He says that right now there's approximately $1.9 million available. But that number will change a little bit. They're going through their final cost accounting with the federal government and the state government, because the state also, on projects like this, the state also can charge off some of its time to management of the project. So, and approved in a previous CIP project was some money to funds to take a look at, what we could do and prepare some cost estimates in the Mystic area. I have included in the referral the engineer's report, and from that report we are making several recommendations. We sat down with the town manager, we being John Reiner and myself, sat down with the town manager and to go over the items. One, there's several items. One is on Noank Street. There's a small portion from Fort Rachel Place to Latham. It's a small, what we call leftover from Phase 2. There weren't enough funds to put a concrete sidewalk in here. We would complete that. On Water Street, which is by the public boat access to Noank Road, we have a public dock down there. That also completes a small area that wasn't completed during the Phase 2. And that's where the numbers are there. What we're looking at is replacing on Library Street the sidewalks from West Main to Elm Street. There's currently existing sidewalks. They need to be replaced. They are deteriorated. So that would fund the replacement of the sidewalks. On West Main Street, which is Route 1, we want to carry the sidewalk up from Library Street to Allen Street. On the north side there, the sidewalks are in rough shape. This does not include the Jersey barriers that are on the south side. That's a separate state project that they're going through some design work. It's fairly involved. But it's on the opposite side, where we have sidewalks that have been there forever. They're depressed, they're heaved. There's really, in some areas, there's no curbing. So that would replace that sidewalk. That would carry it up to that intersection. What's of interest here is we looked on Allen Street, and because we know there's several things happening on Allen Street. One is we know there's traffic, and we know there's speeding. Second is on the section of Allen Street from Route 1 heading north for a couple blocks, there are actually concrete curbs and existing asphalt sidewalks that are about 3 feet wide. Those are in tough shape. Trees have grown into them, so the asphalt is heaved. It should be replaced. Going a little further north, what we said a match line there, but if you go from Library Street north on the west side, there was a subdivision that was built in the late 1990s, maybe early 2000, which carried a sidewalk down Allen Street to a portion, and then it ended. So there's a break in the sidewalk on the west side. So what we are proposing here is to take a look at using these funds to do a couple things. One is to complete the sidewalk network. That would take it from the subdivision up there. In fact, there's 2 of them up there. It could continue the sidewalk almost all the way from I-95 south to Route 1. But this will give us an opportunity to take a look at if we can, and I do believe we can, along with the engineers said it's possible, is to create a visual narrowing of the road, actually neck the road down. Right now, if you go down Allen Street from I-95 heading into Groton, it's a raceway. It's 45 miles an hour, and then it goes to 25, but visually, it's a wide road. So what we're taking a look at is actually narrowing the road, putting a curbing in there, putting a sidewalk or bike lane in that section, and actually have it look more of a residential area than an arterial street. So by doing a project on Allen Street, we hope to get some traffic calming. We'll complete a sidewalk and do some sidewalk replacements. The last thing that we would do is attempt to do, again with this project prioritizing, is the Academy Stairs. They go from Bank Street roughly down to Pearl Street. There's an old staircase there. There's part of a metal railing there. In the olden days, they actually had a canvas top. There actually was a cover to that. Those stairs are in need of repair. There's a nice method of, or way of getting down from the Upper Bank Street down to Pearl Street, and it is used. So we would repair that. We did take a look at two other areas, which was High Street, which was from Main Street, West Main, to Godfrey Street, and with our resurfacing project, we just put the granite curbing back up again and we replaced the asphalt sidewalks. I would not recommend that we use the money there. And then also on Gravel Street, there's an issue of maybe we should put sidewalks in on the water side of Gravel Street. There's inadequate right-of-way width, and then there's issues of global warming and flooding, and so, excuse me, there's other issues there of trying to get some sort of a walkway in there, and so that's what we're not recommending. So with the latest talk, I've talked with Bill Grant in the last month, and the FYE20 budget that will be coming up before the Town Council and the RTM. If the town would be committing funds for the local match for the design construction, that would be proper. And the construction phase would be no sooner than FYE 21 or 22, because again, after the design work, we have to enter into agreements, and there's reviews and everything else under the sun that has to be done. This was the same process that we used for, the grant process, the grants from the state, and qualifying engineers and doing all the process was the same process as we used for phase 1 and phase 2 of the Mystic Streetscapes, and also for Crystal Lake Road. So what I wanted to do is just brief the council on this, because what I would like us to be able to propose this in the FYE20 Capital Improvement Program CIP project. What I didn't want to do is put this project this large in my presentation or in my proposal to the town manager and then to the town council and RTM of a project this large. If the council has some interest in this, I'll include it, do a little bit more, have some more discussions with the state to verify the numbers of what we have here, what we're looking at in the timetable. And then you will see that in the proposed FYE20 capital improvement program. I think it's very positive with 80% federal funds and 20% matching town funds. We get a lot of sidewalk replacement in that area that needs to be done, and maybe some traffic calming on Allen Street.
Okay, Councilor Heath had a comment.
So I added this up. It's $1,791,900. So for the sake of easy math, that's $1.8 million total for the project. So we would be responsible for 20% of that, which is, call it $180,000.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So that's the ask. Right. I mean, give or take, maybe 160, 150. So.
If it's $1.8 million and 20%, that's 360. 10% is 180.
You're right.
I do like your number, but.
So the amount to us would be?
$360,000.
If he decides to put this in the CIP, it would be included in the CIP, which has to come from him and then get through John before
Not all
it would get to
in the
us.
first year either. It'd be about, I think you put it, the preliminary at 150,000.
Right. Talking with the state, the first chunk of money that would come to us, that 20% would be for the design work. And then the construction, there'd be another, an agreement with the state for the construction portion, and that would be the remainder. So following what the councilor had said, you don't put all the money up front, we just use the money when we need it. So that's what I proposed, about $150,000 in for the first year, but I'll verify that number with Bill Grant at the state, is that's the right number for the design portion of the town's share.
Okay, I have a question, then we have Councilors Perry and Councilor Aubry. I was curious about Allen Street. And you're talking about having to calm it because it's high-speed traffic through there. And I was wondering why it was built to be so wide, and I was wondering if it was built wide for the same reason that Plymouth Street was built wide as a means of egress. Is it a major road that has to stay that wide as a means of egress for that part of town, or why was it built that way in the first place?
It was, and this is anecdotal, but what I was told is the same reason that Route 117 was built that wide. It was going to be a connection down, Route 117 was going to be a connection down into Bluff Point. This was the connection down into the Mystic area. I don't know if it was going to go further down West Main, down into Route 215, but it was a state road. It was getting from I-95 down to Route 1. And it was supposed to, it's limited access. I mean, there's driveways, you can't break, there's a limited access line, so the budding property owners on that large portion up there, you can't put a driveway in. The state has a restriction on the lands that you can't break that line. So what it was is to get traffic down quickly down into the area. It dumps down into a residential area, down 45 down to 25 in a kind of a blind curve. So that's what we're looking at visually, if we can make it look more like a residential neighborhood, either with plantings or welcome to something that you'll see it there, versus you just, all of a sudden you come up to a curve and it's 25 miles an hour and it's just way too fast. So we hope those things, and by narrowing the road, there are studies out, it does calm traffic by narrowing the road down. It appears. I don't know if we could put a little jog in it. I don't think so. We'll take a look at all of that to just calm traffic, meaning getting it a little slower.
Okay, so Councilor Zepari and then Obrey.
I'm still a little confused. I'd written to John about it today, and he answered me, but I didn't look at the answer yet. So I'm going to ask you, I understand that this is overall about a $3 million project. And that am I correct, 2.96 is what you had in your letter, in the written materials?
1.9.
1.9, I do believe. The 2.9 was from the engineering firm. We had them take a look at all of the sections. So,
Yeah.
so the engineering firm said, look at this, so we have a whole list of areas that we had. Came up with 2.9, we don't have that money, so that's why I made a recommendation of taking a couple sections out.
I see. Well, I was just wondering, if we get 80% from the federal government and there's $1.9 million available from the state, why should the town of Groton have to come up with anything?
It's just part of the grant. The town has to.
It's a requirement.
It's a requirement. If you want the state money, the federal money, you have a 20% match.
Okay.
So essentially, if you did, you'd have to figure out whatever it is, 2.5 million project, 20% brings it to 1.9. To capture the whole money, you'd have to then on top of that figure out what 20% of that is.
Right. And again, these numbers are basic numbers that were at the time. I was talking to Bill Grant, the audits are being completed, he said, and so the number may go up a little bit or down, but it was offered to Groton and Stonington. Stonington said no at the time, so.
Councilor Obrey and then Councilor Heed again.
Is this the only area that this money could be used in?
Mystic area.
Mystic area?
And we asked the state then to try to define that, and they said, well, the Mystic area. So they feel Allen Street is still Mystic, and around the area that we had defined. We did review that with them. We asked if it could be extended further, and they said, well, it's not quite Mystic. So they're looking for that downtown streetscape walkability.
Hey, it's worth a try. No, actually, what I was thinking about is at the top of Fort Hill, we're going to have schools up there and we don't have sidewalks, coming to the area. It would be great if we could actually put some sidewalks up there where kids will be walking.
Yeah, we only have on a short section, the other section up there now.
Who owns the Academy stairwell?
Town does.
Okay, so we're really responsible for that.
It's part of the town's right away, correct.
Okay. I think it's going to take a lot of explanation because I know most people are right up to here with the Mystic streetscape. They'd like to see things done in the other parts of the town.
Correct, but the funding's fundings for here. So.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I just say that's what we're going to hear from the public, I think. You know, it's been a long process, and there haven't been things happening in other places where they should, especially Fort Hill. We should be, probably we have to look towards what they'll be doing when they do the schools and see what we're going to need to do in order to make it walkable. You can put that on your list, John.
Counselor Schmidt hasn't talked yet, so I'm going to go to her and then back to you, Counselor Heed.
I just wanted to say that for at least 9 months of the year, Allen Street is the only way that you can use to get over to the other side of the river. And because the traffic is horrendous going over the Mystic River Bridge, it is impossible. You just sit there waiting half an hour before you can turn left. And so now what a lot of people do, they just simply go up to Allen Street and off to 95 and then take the exit off on the other side so that they can bypass all of that congestion. I think it's a regularly used road. It is not something that is just sporadic. It's something that's very vital to traffic in the area.
Oh, for us to do this project on a state road, there's all the requirements, you know, for traffic to keep it moving with the understanding. If there's peak periods, they can be written into the contract. If the contractor, just like we did on Crystal Lake Road, has to move off the road if there's the Mystic Art Festival would be what comes with that. Is a portion of time that they just can't work. If you write that into the contractor knows it, and it can be worked. Will there be some disruptions? A little bit, yes. But not as much as downtown Mystic, because that was really congested, storefronts, businesses. These are more in residential areas.
But it's a very vital road for all of us. Right.
Councilor Heath?
So I think putting it in perspective, you're asking us if we wouldn't mind if you put it in as one of the possible CIPs. We may get there, and there could be 10 other CIPs that have a higher
I could turn it down.
Priority, or you could turn it down, right. So I have no objection to putting it in, and then we go through all the CIPs at that point. I would say, though, that Mystic being the #1 tourist attraction in the state of Connecticut, I think it's really important that we finish the projects in that side. I think you build on your strength, and we need to Councilor Opry's point, we need to look at other ideas around the town. But I'm not opposed to at least considering this one during the budget process. So that being said, when you indicated that you would want to narrow Allen Street, a thought popped in my head from the POCD. And I remember in Back Bay, Boston, when I used to live there, I would go down, I forget the road, but instead of narrowing the street, if you were able to have one lane on this side, one lane on the other side, and then the middle becomes some sort of a park or a bicycle lane, you know, with trees and walking benches, all that kind of thing. That would change the whole, without slowing down or limiting the egress.
Absolutely, absolutely. We good point. We could look at that versus just narrowing it down to asphalt, making more of a boulevard or something more of an entranceway. Absolutely. Whether it be fundable or not, don't know, but absolutely. That's a good thought.
I just wanted to go back to something you said when you were describing things, and you were saying this was a state project, and I wanted to clarify. Route 1, coming down the Baptist Hill, the Jersey barriers, the state is working on getting those replaced?
Right. I can call the state and I could get the town manager an update. For the last 2 years, they said they've been working on a fix. It's not an easy fix. The barrier or the metal beam, it's not even metal beam rail, the metal pipe rail was deteriorated, and what they found is that more or less the structure is cantilevered under the road. So you just, the foundation for the wall isn't there, so they use the cantilever. So once they have to do a repair, half the road comes up. But I need to have a little bit more information from the state on where they're progressing that along. Bill Grant from the state did say is that you know, these funds could not be used for that side of the road. That's a state project. But I can give, I'll get John an update on that process, because that's been hanging out there for at least 2 years.
Thank you. Mr. Burke.
I was good. It was probably about 3 or 4 months ago. I have the contact for the person at the state that's kind of the engineer for that. And there had been no progress at that point, and he was saying there's not money to do it anytime soon, but they're hoping in a year or two, but it'd be nice to have a further update.
I'll see if I can
Yeah.
push from Bill.
Do we still have them in front of the burned-out house, where they're building the new one? Are the ones gone from there?
This is what I was, this is the area I was talking about across the street from that. Baptist Hill. So if you're going down the hill and the church is going to be on the left,
Yeah,
this is on the right-hand side there.
right, but there were some on the left, weren't there? That were put in temporarily? I don't know if there's still...
I
When
don't think so.
all the runoff was coming out of where the house had burned.
Right where the house is burnt, the only thing that I know that we put in there is some fencing. And it was temporary wire fencing, metal fencing. Not the Jersey, but the Jersey barriers are on the other side, but I don't think there were any permanent ones there, but.
Okay.
It's interesting that we're
Yes.
talking about a concrete wall and a steel barrier. I mean, that's very much in the news these days.
Yeah, we're going to build our own wall.
So Councilor Heed was trying to put things in perspective. So is there any objection to Mr. Schneider proposing these things in the CIPs to Mr. Burton?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, very good. You had a long night, Mr. Schneider.
Thank you. That was a motion.
No motion on that, just consensus. So we have gone through all the new business. Review of any other agenda items? I don't believe so. Any other business?
Can I just do a reminder about St. John's?
Yes, do
St.
you
John's
want to say it
Christian
again?
Church, January 21st, 11 a.m. Shinnecock Road.
And the public is invited as well?
And the public is invited as well.
Okay, very good. Anyone else have other business?
Just a,
Yes.
are we going to do a quarterly coffee with the counselor?
We are. I posted it online, and I believe it's the
You got to do a
24th?
flyer so we can get it out.
Oh, I
that way,
didn't see that, I'm
so
sorry.
we can share on
I
Facebook.
will share it next council meeting. It's on, I have it on Facebook already, I just don't remember off the top of my head. Okay.
January 24th,
January 24th.
5
And-
PM at Fitch Middle.
Yes,
or Community
Councilor
Center.
Aubry had requested that we hold the listening session, meet and greet at the Groton Community Center, so that's where we're going to be.
Okay.
And I will bring the flyer next time. Any other business? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Moved by Parker, is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Atwater. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So moved unanimously, and we are 7-0-0. And we are recessed at 9:15.